part of holistic education is giving back. So 1 week out of every quarter, we do some type of service project and we give back, and we spend the remaining part of that week dedicated to exposure. How do you know what you want to do with your life if you're not exposed to the possibilities? So we make sure we bring in people to do projects with the kids. We go on field trips so they can see other things. What can we do to let them know that the world is bigger than your community, your city, your state? It is huge. So there may be that exposure over time leads to them saying, I know I want to do this. This is my place in the world, and I am ready to go after it.
That was the voice of Dr. Brenda Jones, founder and executive director of Invictus Charter School, the first public charter Montessori school in Nashville, opening its doors in August of 2025. Dr. Jones is a Nashville native with 14 plus years of education and leadership experience throughout Nashville. The goal of Invictus is to help students discover their unique interests and develop the skills necessary to become successful in high school and a career of their choosing. As part of their Montessori model, Invictus is committed to instilling in students the belief that they can succeed at any path forward, despite the obstacles. My name is Scott Campbell, and I'm the Executive Director of the Nashville Incubator. And you're listening to Back to the Whiteboard, a podcast featuring conversations with innovative leaders in the education reform space. You can learn more about the Nashville Incubator and get involved at tnincubator.org. I'm really excited to be able to be seated here with Dr. Brenda Jones. Welcome, Dr. Jones.
Well, hello. Thank you for having me.
Brenda is the executive director of Invictus Charter School. And I want to start with, kind of what I start with everybody, which is kind of what's the problem that you were trying to solve when you said, I want to open up Invictus in Nashville?
Absolutely. So the problem I was trying to solve was creating a school that would allow us to spend more time helping students figure out what they wanted to do post-graduation. So how do we spend more time ensuring that they learn the skills necessary that will transfer across careers, college, whatever the case may be, and invest in that? So that when they graduate, they actually know what they might want to do and they have a plan to pursue that.
Which is interesting then that you said, let's start with pre-K, K, and build that like to 8th as opposed to, I'm a former high school principal, let's go 9, 12. So like, why that decision to open up a school that's a pre-K through 8?
Well, that was not the original plan. I actually was going to propose a 6 through 12.
Yeah.
But one of the primary things that was important to me when building a school was to get community buy-in. What did the community want? Even though they know this is a need, but what do you want? And when we went out into the community, they loved everything that we wanted to do. And the one thing that came back was, you need to start younger. You need to start younger. Our kids, by the time they're in middle school and high school, don't have the skills you're trying to infuse into the building. They don't understand how to be an innovative thinker or how to take control of their life. They've been pre-programmed already into this one way of learning. So they say, you need to start younger. And I said, okay, I hear you. And now let's design this school from a backwards approach, which actually led me to Montessori, because now I had to scrap what I know about 6 through 12 and think, well, what type of academic programming would allow us to get kids where they need to be to fulfill the vision that I had for 6 through 12? And Montessori research is what came back.
That's so funny. So I think as we've talked to a number of different founders, right, some of them are like, I had experience doing this. I grew up loving this. Montessori is not something that you actually had a background in, but you heard the community. They said, we want this. And so just tell me about that. Why Montessori? How does that sort of solve the problem here that this community is asking for?
Yeah. So, I'm not traditionally trained Montessorian, so I did have a good relationship with my fellowship with BES, and I was a part of a 2-year cohort. So I was able to...
BES, for clarity, is Building Excellent Schools.
Yes.
Okay, great.
Building excellent schools. And I was in a 2-year fellowship that allowed me to spend month-long residencies at schools of my choice. So I chose 4 Montessori schools across the country so that I can dive into it. And then I went ahead and took my Montessori administration courses and received my certification for that. And I knew that this was something that was missing from the Nashville landscape immediately. Upon further research, you find out that most Montessori schools here are private and have a tuition, and there are only 2 public ones in the district, and our district serves over 100,000 students. So I said, this is a need, and I know that it aligns to what the parents said they wanted for their 6 through 12, that the kids get this autonomy and they get to choose and they have somebody guiding them and follow them in this classroom to make sure that they learn at their own pace. It was definitely a need. So we know the alignment is there from what the parents were saying. And then when we went back to parents and said, well, what about Montessori? We explained what it was for the parents who didn't understand. And then we explained to the parents who do understand, like, yes, this is a need. And it's free. Thank you. So, yeah.
It's so important. I mean, so not to hide the lead, this would be the first public Montessori school in Nashville.
First charter one, yes, it is.
I love it. So thank you. I mean, for meeting, because I hear it all the time, families with like a lot of excitement about the Montessori model. And so it's so important that you're opening up this kind of first charter Montessori school in our community. You went and did fellowships at 4 schools that do this. And I guess you've also done a lot of research on it. I mean, who's doing this in a way that really excites you around the country?
I'm really excited about the work that's happening at Libertas School of Memphis, which was the first public charter Montessori school in the States, right? They are doing this really well in Fraser, and the families are so excited. The kids are excelling, and they have a really great retention rate with their teachers, so they are happy there. So it's really exciting to see it modeled in a way that I know is serving the least of us, which is one of my primary focuses in bringing this school, is how can we make this accessible to more families and remove as many barriers as possible. So it is really exciting to see it done in Tennessee, executed really well. So I'm really excited about that.
Well, and for people who are listening who don't know, Fraser in Shelby County is historically one of the lowest income and has some of the lowest test scores in the entire state of Tennessee. And so to open up and to do it there and to be really successful and see that young people thriving, families really excited about the model is like, it's pretty amazing.
Absolutely.
And so tell me about like the location, your focus here in Nashville. Where will Invictus be?
So Invictus will be located in District 4, which is the Donaldson, Hermitage, Old Hickory area. And that is also considered the McGavitt cluster. So that is our primary target. When you look at District 4, there's only one other charter in the entire district. And that charter is a middle school. So it's not even an elementary focused middle school. Now, one of the 2 Montessori schools that are part of the district is also in that area, and they traditionally have a 100+ wait list. Families are knocking at the door to try to get in. So we'll meet a need by telling them there's another option here for you, and hopefully bridge some gaps and keep people in District 4 versus having people look for other options around the city outside of District 4.
So good. So tell me about like the very specific model at Invictus and what's going to be innovative about being a student at Invictus.
Absolutely. So when you think about what I said at first, how do we help students figure out what they want to do with their lives, right? How do we focus more on feeding that? Because I do believe my theory of action, if you want to call it that, is that if we pour more into children, the academics will come, versus the reverse, where you focus solely on academics and not the holistic approach. So at Invictus, Montessori is one method, right? It's the academic piece of our program that builds autonomy and self-discovery and innovation. But we have 2 other components. One is our mentoring program. So every morning, children are in mentoring groups groups with teachers and small mentoring groups, working through SEL, but really it's a check-in on the person. Are you okay? Are you hungry? Do you need a nap? Was last night all right? We want them to know that we see you at the beginning of the day. And when they're little bitty babies, do you know how to navigate this space? Are you anxious? But as they get older, we grow into like, what are your goals? What's happening academically? What are your habits and hobbies? And we start to hone in on those skills as they become middle schoolers and high schoolers eventually. And then we have our community expedition piece. I truly believe that we spend too much time in the building, and that we don't go out and look at other ways to learn. So a part of holistic education is like giving back. So 1 week out of every quarter, we do some type of service project and we give back, and we spend the remaining part of that week dedicated to exposure. How do you know what you want to do with your life if you're not exposed to the possibilities? Yep. So we make sure we bring in people to do projects with the kids. We go on field trips so they can see other things. We have partnerships with Camp Wijiwagen. Do we go horseback riding? Do we go kayaking? What can we do to let them know that the world is bigger than your community, your city, your state? It is huge. So there may be that exposure over time leads to them saying, I know I want to do this. This is my place in the world, and I'm ready to go after it.
I love it. That exposure, right, is exactly what you were thinking when you wanted to create a 612 school, which is students actually have a better understanding of what their post-secondary opportunities are.
Absolutely. It saves you on a lot of student loans, I'll tell you that.
So true. And so, like, some of the other pieces, right, like, what inspired you around these other pieces? And, I mean, even going back, like, what inspired you in the first place to sit down and say, this is, I'm seeing the need for students around this post-secondary pathways and having a better understanding of what they want to become and then knowing how to get there.
Yeah. So I was born and raised in Nashville, and I am a first-generation high school graduate. So no one in my family had graduated high school before I did, and obviously I went on to do post-secondary college and all the things, right? And as an educator, I started to realize that children were still experiencing the same barriers that I did 20 years ago, 30 years ago, right? And as a teacher, it was only so much I could do within the environments that I was in to help as many children as I can. So I said, you know what? I'm going to become a school leader. And then I became a school leader, and still, there were only so many things that I can do. So I actually, in 2019, stepped away from the day-to-day and started working for an ed tech company that allowed me to travel the country and coach other school leaders. And you know what I found? It didn't matter what state you were in. It didn't matter how many years you've been in education. We were all still facing the same issues across the country. How do we better serve our staff? How do we better serve our students? And the pandemic hit. The world shut down. And my sister and I said, oh my God, they're going to go virtual. And there are so many families who have no idea how to navigate this. So we opened a tutoring center in like 3 weeks. We raised money, opened a tutoring center. We said, drop your kids off here all day. I called my friends and said, during your virtual off periods, I want you here tutoring kids and helping them through virtual classes. And someone said, you know you want to open a school. If this is not a demonstration of what is possible, I don't know what is. They said, come back. It's time. And I was introduced to the Nashville Incubator. I told them about what I've learned traveling the country, what I think needs to be true for my hometown. And they said, how can we help? And from there, BES, community involvement, and the birth of Invictus, which means unconquerable, by the way.
Well, okay, so tell me more about, was that it, Invictus? You chose that name, just unconquerable, unconquerable? Yeah, tell me about Invictus. Like, what does that mean for students?
So Invictus is really inspired by the poem, and I chose that name because it means unconquerable, but the poem itself, I heard it as a freshman at Belmont University. It has stuck with me. The meaning behind it has stuck with me. If we have the time, I will recite it for you guys. It basically means that you might be dealt a hand. we don't know what their hand is in life, right? And life is hard, but you still get to decide your outcome. You are still the master of your fate. You are still the captain of your soul, despite statistics, despite what anybody's telling you, your environment. You can still choose a path forward. And when I heard it, it resonated with me in my journey as a student and a high school graduate and coming along the way. And over time, you just find yourself going back to that poem. No matter how hard life gets, I can still choose my path. And I think all children need to hear that. You get to choose your path. Let me help you. I didn't say it was going to be easy, because it's not. But you still have a choice. You still have free will. Let's make the right decisions today. So Unconquerable Nashville, Invictus Nashville is just what I want to instill in children. Like, you can do this. It's not easy. I want to make sure people know that. But you can still do it.
Well, you personify it, right? So if there's ever any sort of question from a student or family, right, like, can we do this? Like, you're like, no, look, me, right? And I also just love this like common thread through this conversation of, I see a need, I listen to what the community was saying, and we met it, whether that was in COVID or whether it was in design of this school, right? It was, well, what are people actually saying in this community that they need? And that really should be, in my view, right, the start of any school in innovation, right? We need to actually meet a need if we're trying to innovate rather than just sort of what we want in a school. So thank you for what you're continuing to do. You're about to open this school. It'll start in first class, and it'll be pre-K through second.
Yes.
Starting in the fall of 2025.
Yes.
Very exciting. Tell me about sort of the next problems you're trying to solve in this process, right? Because you've created a vision. Now families are excited about it. It's been approved. Like what are the things right now that you're like, okay, in the next year, I really want to solve X, Y, and Z, other than, we know that the school will open. What are those other problems you're trying to solve?
Yeah, I think that there's still an issue around educating on the Montessori way, right? There's a vast difference between parents who approach me who know all about Montessori and parents who have no idea what that means, not just for their children, but for themselves. So I will be trying to figure out how we create series or professional development opportunities going to these families in these communities to educate them on how this will impact their children, but also their own lives. Because Montessori kids think, act, and talk differently. So we want parents to be prepared when their kid comes home and says, I want to do X, Y, and Z. And they're like, no. And then they're like, but I want to, and know that they're not being disrespectful. There's this autonomy that we're instilling in them, right? We're asking them what they want to do. So making sure parents are prepared for that as well. And I think that the second problem that's near and dear to my heart right now is finding not only funding, but opportunities to increase our pre-K program. Pre-K in Tennessee is not mandatory, and there are not a lot of pre-K programs. But if we want to serve the people from lower socioeconomic statuses, we have to provide not only pre-Ks, but funding for those, because it costs. And I am going to do my best to figure out how we expand that program and/or find funding for it so that we can get more families who might not be able to pay a tuition for pre-K into these programs early, because early start for children, we know based off research, is important for literacy, for math, for all of the things. So we want to get them before kindergarten. We want to get them at 3, and we want to get them at 4. So those are two big ones that I am going to be trying to solve over the next year.
Early childhood education, early literacy. Gosh, these are just like the building blocks for everything else that comes after.
Absolutely.
And you're attacking both of them. So
I'm after it. It's my goal.
All right. So I want you to paint me a visual picture here of you're walking down the hallway with Dr. Jones this upcoming fall in Invictus. And, what will we see? What is a painting, a picture of what kind of a perfect day, or what the classrooms and what kids are going to be doing and what the experience will be?
Absolutely. I would say walking down a hallway and entering into a classroom at Invictus, you will see a very small group of children with the lead guides in the room working through a Montessori lesson that is tied to academic content and standards. You will see the guide in the classroom with a clipboard following the other half of the classroom around the room because they get to choose, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you might see children working through the movable alphabet on the carpet. You might see someone writing in cursive in the back of the room. You might see a group of children doing some type of constellation project. It's very much so not a traditional classroom. You won't see people just sitting behind a desk or children sitting there taking notes. So you will see kids taking care of the environment, moving around smoothly around the room with a guide following them to support them, and a teacher probably on a carpet with a group of kids working through the next lesson so that they can then go out and explore in the room as well. So it's very inviting, it's very warm, it's very creative, and it's calm. I believe in organized chaos. So to the untrained eye, you're like, why are these kids moving around?
Yeah.
But with just a little background there, you'll be like, okay, they're choosing this path.
And yet, the research shows that in the midst of that sort of educational experience, they're still going to get the same, if not better, sort of like state test scores down the road, right? Like they're still learning the same content.
They are learning the same content in a different way or with reinforcement from different materials. And one of the things that I always highlight is the mixed age bands. You will be in this classroom. If it's a lower L classroom, you'll have some first graders, some second graders, and some third graders. So you might see a first grader working with a third grader. You might see a second grader working on third grade level work because we're following them. And within this band now, which is more representative of the real world because, we don't work with everybody that's the same age as us, it allows them the opportunity to know that in this culture and in this environment, it is okay for me to move ahead. It's okay for me to pause. And if you're a third grader and you need some support, foundational support, it's okay for me to work with the first graders as well. It's a culture of let me meet you where you are, and I will help you get where you need to be.
Well, I would guess that you don't actually have a lot of teachers who've been trained or experienced in this. I'm just kind of curious for like your process of finding the right types of teachers and training and making sure that they're really successful in this type of model.
So one thing I always tell people is good teaching is good teaching. So you are absolutely correct. Not a lot of people are Montessorians. They're not trained. So one of the first things that I did was establish a partnership with Arte, which was a Montessori training program that Libertas created that was approved by the state. So we have a partnership with them to get all of our teachers Montessori trained if they're not already Montessori trained. And because of the cost and the partnership, we're able to afford that within our budget without teachers having to pay for that. But what we look for are the transferable skills in good teaching. If you're not a Montessorian, but you are a good public school teacher or a good private school teacher, there are transferable skills because good teaching is good teaching. So we look for those for our candidates, and then we explain to them the opportunity they will have to get their license if they would like to be the lead guides in the classroom. So that is what we do to bridge that gap.
I love it. And when you talk about guides in the classroom, are those teachers, or are there additional people in the classroom in addition to the trained teacher? Help me understand that.
So there are 2 teachers in every classroom. In Montessori language, they don't call them teacher, they call them guides. So, you'll look at our career page and it say teacher/guide. It's because we want to make sure that Montessorians know guides and teachers are the exact same thing. So your lead guide or your lead teacher will absolutely 100% be Montessori trained. Your assistant guide or your assistant teachers not necessarily have to be trained, but we will encourage them to get training if they would like to so they can eventually become lead guides and teachers in the room. So they're the exact same thing, but in Montessori world, we follow the child, so we guide them. So instead of saying teacher, we call them guides.
I love it. And that obviously creates smaller class sizes or
Yes.
teacher to student ratios.
Yeah, our ratio is 1 to 12.
That's so exciting. And just thank you for the work that you're doing for our community and your clear desire to meet a specific need that you didn't just identify by wanting to do it, but by listening is so important. So if other people want to find out more about Invictus, they either want to enroll or they want to find out about teaching there, or they just want to talk to you, what's the easiest and best way for people to find out more?
Our website is up and going, so you can look at invictus-nash.org on our website to see careers and things of that nature. If you would like more information, you can always email us at info@invictus-nash.org. And our social media presence is out of there. So Facebook at Invictus Nashville, Instagram at Invictus Nashville, LinkedIn at Invictus Nashville. We are here. So follow us, email us. We will be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Well, thank you for being here today. Thank you for being here in this community. I'm really excited about the innovative work you're doing.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for listening to Back to the Whiteboard, powered by the Nashville Incubator. Learn how you can get involved in helping us reform education at tnincubator.org. And if you like this episode, please follow, rate, and review this show wherever you listen to your favorite podcast.